Good evening, everybody. So don't count this against my time. There's way too many things have already happened that I want to talk about before I get into my speech. I told you that for like 30 seconds. I have no idea how you remembered my entire introduction from memory. I am blown away that I couldn't have remembered the first 5 words, so I was very impressed that you did that, number one. Number two, I was reading a book this weekend about medical devices, and the guy described a hearing aid, and he proceeded to bang out in 2 pages a completely revolutionary hearing aid. And what blew me away is that made me happy because I was excited to tell you. So trying to, I had a purpose, and I was so dying to tell you about it. So don't count that against my time. It's not fair. All right, so now to my speech. So this room is actually pretty good for this speech because I wasn't sure how to use props in the bigger room. What I'm holding in my hand are 3 pencils with my name on them. And they're officially the oldest thing that I own about myself. And I got these when I was 9 for graduating 3rd grade. And they were given to me by my teacher, Dr. Falchetta. And I don't have them because he was a great teacher. He was not. He was. I have them because they remind me of my childhood. And they really give me an idea of who I've become since the 3rd grade. But this speech isn't about these pencils, it's about loss. And I can tell you that I would be devastated if I lost those pencils. But not nearly as devastated as my dad is, because last week he lost something from when he was 9 years old. He lost his best friend. And this speech is a tribute to a man who was obviously very close to my father, but also had a very, very momentous impact on me. He was a larger-than-life figure, and he was also somebody who described to me what loyalty and friendship look like. So I'm going to take this time to just talk about this man. His name is Dr. Moshe Scherer. A little bit about the man. When my dad met him, they were about 9 years old, and Israel was going through a very, very special time. It had just become a country, and it was so easy to identify. There was a purpose for being an Israeli. I call it the shirt off your back time, because everybody knew what they were aiming for, surviving, independence. And everybody would just take the shirt off their back and just give it to the guy next to him. And the thing about Scherer is he was the quintessential bad boy and badass. The first thing he did when he got out of high school was he joined the paratroopers. He was shot down by a sharpshooter, and my dad got to visit him behind enemy lines. That's when the real loyalty in their friendship started. He then, as a badass, decided to move into sociology and got his PhD from UPenn, the school that I went to. And I have a picture of my dad at his graduation. He was one of the few people that went to his graduation. My dad in a 3-piece suit with a smile from ear to ear as his best friend got his PhD. And he proceeded to work on issues like battered women, write papers on battered women, and income equality. So this quintessential badass really became a good-hearted person and wanted to give back to the world. Now, knowing Scherer like I do, I know he wouldn't be happy if I just told you how great he was, because he was incredibly crazy. He was not all there. And I want to give you a couple stories about him that shows that there's more to the man beyond just, that he did all these great things. The first thing is when we used to go to Israel, we used to go to camp out at the Sea of Galilee. And there was a nice little campsite there. And every time we'd go, he would bring this massive harpoon and decide that he was going to harpoon fish. Now, there was a restaurant in the campsite with full bar, full everything. Every night, we had these fish with big holes in them. The guy comes from the bar, but he would go and harpoon these fish. He'd go into the water with this massive harpoon. So the man was borderline crazy. Another slightly sour story. When he was 60, he was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And he decided to marry one of his graduate students to help her have a career. A few years later, his prognosis changed. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. And he equally decided that he didn't want to be married anymore. And just in the middle of the day, walked out, left Thailand, and went back to Israel, devastating his past wife. That's the kind of man that he was. That's how he saw the world. I'm trying to remember, I had one other story about him. My dad didn't speak to him for 1 year because he decided that he knew what Muslims were all about. And I'm married, for those of you who don't know, I'm married to a Muslim. And he proceeded to explain to my dad what Muslims are all about. And at that moment, my dad decided not to talk to him. And a year later, they're reconciled. But this was a man who was equally good and equally crazy. The other really important personality, piece of his personality was his loyalty. And I want to tell you guys two stories about one thing that he did for my dad and one thing that my dad did for him, which for me defines what friendship is all about. So in the 90s, Iraq was launching Scuds on Israel, and they didn't know if they had chemical weapons in them. And my grandmother wouldn't put on a gas mask. She just wouldn't do it. And my grandmother was a tough cookie. She wouldn't listen to anybody. So without asking, without even bringing it up, my dad, Shara, went to my grandmother's house, and he just walked in there, and he goes, "Shut up, you're putting on a gas mask, I'm not listening to anything you said," and within 3 hours she had a gas mask on. And there wasn't one moment where my dad actually asked him to do that. Now, turning the tables, when Shara was diagnosed with terminal cancer, there was a medicine available, but it wasn't on the market. You couldn't get it. And so what my dad did is he started calling, and he would get 1 month's supply at a time to keep him alive until the drug made it to market. So he actually kept him alive and saved his life for a few years. He then went on and left his wife, but in the moment it was a very nice and loyal thing. So, I mean, for me, Sharon was this huge man, this icon, this bastion of loyalty to my dad. And I want to leave you guys with the last time I saw him, because for me that's the complete picture. So first of all, we all went out to one of my dad's childhood friend's house. We were all sitting at dinner. And first of all, he was sitting there. This is how he was. The first thing I remember is how small he was compared to how big I remember him. He was about this tall. Second thing, because of this disease, he was a diabetic. So he would just sit there and during the meal, he'd fall asleep. And then he'd wake up and he'd go, "I think I need insulin." He'd just, without taking his blood with anything, just go, and just give himself a shot of insulin. And then he'd wake up and like, that is so crazy. And even in his late 60s, very sick, the man was insane. But the last thing I remember seeing about him is, you have to understand, this guy was such a larger than life figure to me. And I remember him being asked to open a bottle of wine. And I remember him doing this. And not being able to open the bottle of wine. And that's when I knew it was all over. And for me, what that told me is that Father Time always wins. There's no doubt about it. But it's a question of how you live your life. And what I know about Sharer is he was his own man. He was good, he was loyal, he was crazy, but he did things on his own terms.